Being a programmer in a communist country is horrible. The salary is extremely low and the cost of living is very high. All countries in the world have inflation, and they use money printing to dilute the purchasing power of the citizens as a form of mass control. But in Brazil, this is much faster when compared to the United States, for example. And unlike the United States, which is a country with late capitalism, what this means is that the United States had many years of low taxes, which made it possible for the country to grow and become rich. And today the government charges high taxes and prints much more money, which harms the population, but on a much smaller scale than in Brazil, which has never had a time with low taxes and low money printing to develop a little. That is why Brazil is a poor country, full of slums, without basic things, run down and extremely dangerous. The government has never given the population any space to breathe and get rich. The government prints money like crazy and is the #1 country in tax collection in the entire world. A programmer in Brazil works all year to earn the same as a programmer in the US earns in 2 months. And you might think, but things in Brazil must be cheaper than in US. And the answer is a loud and clear no. The country is rich in natural resources and sells them all at a bargain price to other countries to refine, create electronics and food products with higher added value, and then Brazil imports these products paying in dollars and with taxes for the population to use. Practically everything that Brazilians consume is priced in dollars, plus the most expensive taxes in the world, which results in people who earn 6 times less than a citizen of US and pay more for lower quality products. With the impoverishment of the population and increase of the price of everything, it is normal for companies to reduce the quality of their products. So the same product from the same brand is different in Brazil and in a rich country, for example, often having a terrible, unpleasant and disgusting taste. Everything here becomes a lifelong saving project, and many die without being able to afford these things: a house, a car, a laptop, a cell phone. If you want to buy one of these things, you have to save up your whole life, pay in 100 of installments, or buy the cheapest and worst quality item, which will still cost all your money. Nothing here is easy to buy. Everything is a luxury item. In the supermarket, even jars of Nutella and pieces of meat have security seals. In the rest of the world, it is difficult to buy your own home, and rent is expensive all around the world. But in Brazil, not only is housing expensive, but everything else is the same. Everything is expensive and the salary is extremely low in Brazil. People struggle to survive. Every year that passes, people get sadder and sadder. This is a country where crime pays, prostitutes and scammers prosper and get rich easily without any punishment. For you who are a programmer or a professional skilled in another area that is valued in the job market, I think the best thing to do is to look for a job in a better country or find a remote job that pays you in dollar. Normally, companies will not pay the same salary as they pay to the natives. They usually pay less than half of what a native citizen receives. Therefore, you will work as a senior and receive the same salary as a junior developer that lives in US. However, it's much better than the salary in Brazil, where a senior engineer earns less than a McDonald's attendant in the United States.
What is the role of money? It's like you did a lot of work and now you want to save up your money so that sometime in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you'll be able to afford to live. So you're storing economic energy. You could think of money as economic energy, just like you could think of fat as organic energy. You eat a lot, you store fat, and now if you have to go without food for 2, 3, 4 weeks, you're not going to starve to death. If you can't form fat cells, you're type 1 diabetic. A type 1 diabetic can't store organic energy, and they dwindle and they will starve to death. It's a just horrific disease. Being able to store fat isn't a bad thing. We think it's a bad thing, but actually for most of human history, right, the number one reason you died is you starved to death. So it seems pretty intelligent that when you get excess energy, you can store it and hold it for a while. Now let's imagine a person as an economic diabetic. Where do you see that? In a society where the currency is collapsing and hyperinflation, the Weimar Republic, famous example. So you work, I pay, in Zimbabwe, they had it. In Venezuela, they had it. In Nigeria, they're getting it right now. You work, I give you $100. And the $100 buys you 4 meals, but then in 3 months, it buys you 1 meal. And then in 12 months, it buys you 1 soda. And in 24 months, it buys you nothing. Okay, so now you've got a problem. You can't store economic energy. So what happens when the currency dies or the money dies? Well, the society gets ripped back to Stone Age barter. What it means is you can't save anything. And also it means that the unit of account breaks down, so you can't trade. It's like, okay, you have bullets and I have soap. How many bars of soap for bullets? And how do you figure that out? Give me a chicken and I'll give you, a bottle of water. Mm-hmm. Things get very complicated. The civilization just gets ripped back to Stone Age barter. When that happens, all the factories break down. Like imagine trying to trade with your friend for dentistry work. You just be your own dentist. Try that one. Be your own doctor. Take out your appendix. So the money breaks down. The civilization breaks down. That's the danger. But normally in most modern societies, the money doesn't break down as a medium of exchange. It breaks down as a store of value. So that means that, yeah, you can store money for 12 to 36 months or maybe up to 10 years in the dollar. You can't store it for a lifetime. So if you have some money, you can't just store the money. If you want to keep your economic energy, you have to gamble it or invest it. You have to speculate with it, or, you worked your entire life, you have a certain amount of retirement, and now if you store it in the bank, it'll be worth nothing. So you have to go and invest it in the stock market. But if you pick wrong, you lose it. So we basically force people to be gamblers, speculators, or hedge fund managers if the money's broken, and the money is broken. So what is the significance of Bitcoin? Well, let me say it a different way. You just take your money, take everything you earn, you buy Bitcoin, and you wait, and it goes up 20 to 40% a year forever. Or you take your money and you invest it in a bank account and you get 3% after tax, and everything goes up 10 to 15% a year in price, and you just get poorer and poorer. Or what are you going to do? Buy GameStop at the right time? Or you buy a building, run an Airbnb. I force you to go, and forcing you to be a hedge fund manager is horrifically inefficient for the society. It's just as inefficient as saying, okay, be your own dentist and doctor, right? If the medical system was broken, you have to be your own doctor. It's not good for society. What happens? People die 20 years early is what happens. So when you have to be your own banker or be your own hedge fund manager, what happens is you just get poor, or you lose faith in the future. If I told you your money was going to be worthless in 36 months, what would you do with it? You would spend it. What if I told you money's going to be worthless next Monday? You would go out this weekend, make it decadence weekend, and you would just blow it all. You would buy anything. Things you don't need. It's like, if it's for sale, I'm just buying it. So Bitcoin actually solves the problem by saying, well, what if you just had a money that the government couldn't debase, the bank couldn't steal, that would last forever? Okay, it profoundly changes incentives, because now a corporation, instead of buying back its stock or instead of dividending out its cash flows, would just keep the money. And the money would go up in value 20, 30% a year. So that's what MicroStrategy did. Like, what's our secret, right? We're just holding the money, and it's an appreciating asset. Let me try to make one more analogy that might help. It's like, you're an athlete, your blood is carrying oxygen. Oxygen is energy. If you're an athlete, you need the oxygen to circulate, and you need the blood. So before your race, I show up and I say, well, conventional wisdom is I need to bleed you now. So I take a bunch of your blood, and now you run the race. And then next week before the game, I show up and I bleed you again. And what if I just bleed you every week? What if I bleed you every day? Are you as good an athlete? If you're not sure about this, try this experiment. But I think any athlete will tell you, no, the goal is to have as many red blood cells and as much oxygen in your bloodstream when you compete, not to bleed the blood out of your system. So when the government is telling you you should use a currency, the currency is the blood of your corporation or your family or your civilization. When I'm inflating the currency, I'm bleeding the civilization. And in the extreme, if you do this thought experiment, if I just double the currency supply in a banana republic, and your company had whatever, $1 million worth of currency, but I double it and now it only buys half as much, and I double it again and it buys half as much again. You see it's,
yeah.
Now take it back to MicroStrategy. In 2020, we had 2,000 people working as hard as they could work to generate $75 million a year in cash flow. And then we had $500 million of actual assets. And then the government was increasing the currency supply by 20% a year, at 15% a year. If they increase the currency supply at 15% a year, then you're losing $75 million of capital value of wealth every year for the 75 million you're winning. So at the 15% inflation rate of the money supply, 2,000 people are working as hard as they can, doing 100,000 things right for an entire year to stand still. And if I crank the inflation rate up to 30%, I tilt the playing field such that you're running as hard as you can and you're falling backwards. So another way to say it is everything you do is worthless. Your time is worthless. Your life is worthless. You're failing. Right. And then one more analogy. I put you in a rowboat and you row 7 miles an hour and the wind starts blowing the opposite direction, or the current is blowing the opposite direction, and you're actually rowing as hard as you can and you're not moving at all. And then the current picks up and you're rowing as hard as you can and you're going backwards. But there's this point where you're rowing 7 miles an hour and the current's 7 miles an hour, and then you're in the middle of the Atlantic and you horrifically realize you're going to die because you're not getting across. Right. You're not going to make it. And so what do? You reach down, you pull up the sail. You can't row. You can't row against current. You put up the sail, you catch the wind, and let the wind blow you. You're going to have to change the way you do work. In an inflationary currency, right, you probably can't outwork inflation no matter how hard you work. Unless you can grow your revenues. If you ask your boss for a raise 20% a year and you get it every single year, then yeah, maybe you can outrun inflation.